Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a while since I've said that. I've been away for a little bit. This month has been very busy and I'm just getting back into everything. So I'm starting back with the next part in our series. I can't even remember off the top of my head what number in the series we're on, but I'm just going to pick up where we left off. I'm going to be talking about several different women because there are a lot of women that came up from the time of Absalom all the way up until Esther. So I'm trying to go all the way to Esther, and I might need to break this up if it gets a little too long. In the last video, I was talking about Absalom and how he got revenge for Tamar for what Amnon did to his sister. After Absalom took Amnon out, again, I'm going to be talking in code for YouTube purposes, but he got rid of Amnon. He had Amnon taken out, and Absalom fled for his life. He was afraid for his life, so he fled. And David, his father, was very upset with being separated from Absalom. And Joab, who was David's right-hand man, like his war guy, the guy who watched over his troops and like it was his armor bearer and all those, you know, close comrade type of words. That's what Joab was. He saw that David was upset and he wanted to reconcile their relationship. So actually Joab got a wise woman in the town to go to David and present a story. He wanted David to see his situation in a different light. So Joab had this wise woman pretend to be a mourner, act like something happened with your son, tell David the story that people want to get revenge on what your son did and that he needs protection. She presented a story where her son had done wrong and had killed someone, and that people were trying to get revenge on him and trying to take him out. And David's response was basically like he would watch over and make sure nothing happened to her son. And so when he presented that as an answer, she basically pointed it back to him and made him realize that he was describing his own situation and that he could protect Absalom from the revenge seekers as well, and he could get forgiven. And so then he asked the woman, did Joab put you up to this? Because this, you know, sounds like Joab had a hand in this. And the woman admitted that Joab had told her what to do and put her up to it. And so he understood how it was connected, and he sent for Absalom. So Absalom did come home, but David didn't see him for a while. And then Absalom became upset that, you know, why did he send for me and he doesn't want to see me? But that's a whole nother story. Just wanted to point out what the wise woman did and the part she played in the story. And then the next situation, there was a troublemaker named Sheba. Sheba rose up against David and he started to chant against David's dynasty. He got people to follow him, and he said that they had no interest in David. They wanted his dynasty to go down. And because he had followers, David started to get nervous that Sheba was going to wreak more havoc than even Absalom had done. So he wanted him to be taken out. So he sent Joab after this man, Sheba, to take him down. And the plan was that they needed to capture him before he reached a fortified city. So he did enter a city. Joab and his men chased him through there. And when Joab got to the city, he started to attack the city. So I don't know what that exactly means. Maybe he was breaking doors down and throwing things around trying to find Sheba. But a wise woman came out and she confronted Joab. She asked him, are you Joab? And I guess the Lord had revealed to her who he was, but he did confirm, yes, he was Joab. She's like, I'm peace loving and faithful to Israel, and you're destroying a very important city in Israel. Why would you want to do that? And he said he did not want to destroy the city, but that he was looking for a man named Sheba. Joab told the woman that Sheba had revolted against David and that all he wanted was this man, and that if they were to turn this man over to him, that they would leave the city alone. And the woman said, we're going to throw his head over the wall to you. Don't worry. I got you. And then the wise woman went to the people in the town with her wise advice and let them know the situation. They got Sheba, cut his head off, and threw it over the wall to Joab. Joab was satisfied, gathered his men together, and they left. So that was her contribution to history. And now next is a little short piece of a story about the woman named Rizpah, and I think I mentioned her in one of the other parts because she was Saul's concubine that someone had accused another man of being with. and that man was upset because of the accusation. So that's in one of the other parts. I'll reference it somewhere on the screen. I can't recall which one it is right now. But later on, there was a famine in the land that lasted about 3 years. And the Lord revealed to David that the reason there was the famine is because of what Saul did to the Gibeonites. So apparently there was a promise that the Gibeonites would not be harmed. But Saul didn't actually take them all out, but he did try to wipe them out. So a lot of them were Murdered under Saul's leadership. But there were some left, so David wanted to rectify the situation. He gathered some of the Gibeonites together and he asked them, what can I do to get this right, to make this right? They said they wanted David to hand over 7 of Saul's sons and they would take them and execute them. So David went and got 2 of Rizpah's sons. Rizpah, again, being Saul's concubine, so those were Saul's 2 sons, but then he needed 5 more, so he took 5 of Merab's sons, and Merab was Saul's daughter. So in a way, they were his sons, just another generation. So those were the 7. Jonathan had a son named Mephibosheth, which David had promised to take care of, and Jonathan had already passed away, and Mephibosheth was under David's care, and he, like I said, promised Jonathan that he would watch over him. So he was not going to turn him over. So he gave 2 of Rizpah's sons and 5 of Merab's sons. And that's all, I think, that were available. Or whatever, however you want to say it. He turned them over to the Gibeonites, and the Gibeonites took them out. So what Rizpah did is she covered a rock with some burlap, and she just pretty much sat there, camped out there, and watched over the bodies of these 7 men, young men. She was guarding their bodies from scavengers and vultures and anything that would eat them up, and she stayed out there and protected them as she mourned. And then once David learned what Rizpah was doing, he went and gathered Jonathan's bones, Saul's bones, and the bodies of these men that the Gibeonites had executed, and he buried them all in a tomb, the tomb of Kish, and Kish was Saul's father. And once that was all done, God ended the famine. And then another woman we learn about is Abishag. She was a young woman in the town. So time is going on, of course. David is getting older. He's sickly and weak. And at this point, he's so sick he can't get warm. Apparently, no blankets, no amount of blankets can warm him. So his men get a woman from the village, a young lady named Abishag, who they wanted to come and take care of him, pretty much give him body heat, warm him, and just lay with him and also care for him. And David did not have any relations with this woman, but she was like his caregiver. So that's another woman named Abishag. And then where Abishag comes in again is that Adonijah now, who is one of David's other sons, he decides to rise up and proclaim that he's going to be the king. He wants to take over the throne from his father, and he's getting people on his side. He has some supporters and people that really want to see him as the king. Now, Nathan was a prophet. He was against Adonijah becoming king. So he went to Bathsheba, who we've talked about before. She was one of the women that David ended up marrying after he had her husband killed. That's in another video. I will link to that one and also put the title here, so in case you want to go back and check that out. But Bathsheba now is the mother of Solomon. Bathsheba and David had Solomon, so that's their son. And apparently David had promised that Solomon was going to be the next king. So Nathan went to Bathsheba and said, you hear what Adonijah is doing? He's trying to rise up and take over the throne from your son, Solomon. So Nathan recommended that Bathsheba go and confront David about this situation and just, bring light to it and make sure that it gets resolved. And that's exactly what Bathsheba did. Nathan told her, while you're in there talking to David, I'm going to come in too, and I'm going to pretty much basically back you up. And that's exactly what happened. So Bathsheba requested word with the king, David. She let him know, like, you promised that my son Solomon was going to be the next king, and you hear what Adonijah's doing. Are you really going to allow this to happen? Then Nathan came in while Bathsheba was there and just let David know everything that was happening, what Adonijah was doing. And so David called Bathsheba back in. I guess she had stepped out. I don't know how that works, but he called her back in and he let her know Solomon is going to be the next king. And that's exactly what happened. David ended up passing on in life, passed away, and Solomon did in fact become king. And then next, Adonijah, now that Solomon is king, he presents a question or a favor to Bathsheba. He asked Bathsheba, can you please ask your son Solomon if I can marry Abishag, the woman that was taking care of David. Now David's passed on, Solomon is in charge. Adonijah knows that Solomon will listen to his mother, so he uses her to try to get what he wants. So Adonijah tells Bathsheba, the throne was basically mine. Like, I had supporters, people were on my side, and the table somehow turned to Solomon. So the least you can do is ask him if I can marry Abishag. So Bathsheba agrees. She goes to Solomon. Solomon's sitting at his throne. And then when his mother comes in, what he does is he's sitting on his throne. He has another throne brought in for his mother to sit down next to him. So he's on his throne. He brings another throne. She comes and sits by him. And then she makes her request. She's like, how about Adonijah marry Abishag? Like, what do you think? Solomon was not having that. He was upset with that request. He's like, why would you even ask me that? Yeah, so he was really upset with that request. And so he was so upset that Adonijah would even present that as a possibility that he ordered Adonijah, Killed, and it was done. Adonijah was taken out. Like, don't ask me that. How dare you? And then later, Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, who was the king of Egypt, and he married one of Pharaoh's daughters, and he set her up in the city of David while he was building the palace. So Solomon was building a palace for him and his wife to live in. So Solomon was working on the palace, and while he was doing that, his wife was set up in the city of David. We don't know what her name is, but it's Pharaoh's daughter and Solomon's wife. So that's one little snippet. And like I said, I'm going just straight in line in order of all these different women that are appearing in the Bible. If I miss anybody, please let me know in the comments. I would really appreciate it. I tried to do my due diligence and my thorough research to like make sure I didn't miss anybody. If they had even like a paragraph worth of a story, I'm trying to include that. So again, if I miss somebody, please just put it down in the comments, please. And then later, the Lord came to Solomon in a dream and asked him, you know, like, what do you want? What can I do for you? Like, who wouldn't love to have that question asked to them from God? Like, you can ask, like, what do you want? Solomon asked for wisdom. And then he woke up and realized it was a dream, but in actuality, it actually came true. So the Lord was like impressed. You didn't ask for wealth. You didn't ask for a longer life. You didn't ask for riches, fame, or fortune. You asked for wisdom. So I'm going to give it to you. That's why Solomon has been known as like the wisest man to ever live, I guess. And like I said, he was granted wisdom as it's confirmed in the Bible. And then there was a situation that was presented to Solomon that displayed his wisdom. There were these two women that both had children about 3 days apart. And one, I don't know if all versions of the Bible say that they're prostitutes, but one version of the Bible did mention that they're prostitutes, but I guess they were living in a house together. And one night they're sleeping, and one of the women rolls over on her baby, and the baby passes away. The baby dies. And in the night before the morning, she switched the baby out. So the woman who rolled over on the baby gave her dead baby to the other woman, and then she took that woman's live baby as her own. And when the woman woke up to feed her baby, the baby was dead, and she was startled, and then she realized, this is not my child. So these two women were presenting their case to Solomon, and the one who had the baby taken from her, her live baby taken, told the whole story. Like, this is what happened. She rolled over on the baby in the night. We were only two in the house. She took the baby, switched it out, la la la. She knew the whole thing. Like, she was asleep, but somehow she was able to retell the story, knew what happened. So Solomon said, okay, well, let's take the baby and split the baby in half. You take one half and you take the other half. So one woman was like, oh yeah, let's do that. Do it. The other woman said, no, let her have the baby. So Solomon knew the woman who was ready to spare the child and allow the child to be taken by the other woman was the real mother. So he said, give her the baby. She's the real mother. Wisdom. So that got a lot of attention back then, because I guess like people couldn't figure things out like that back then, but Solomon could. He was wise. I'm sure he did a lot of other things as well, but that was a notable story, and that was about these two women who had an altercation over a baby. And next, the Queen of Sheba visits Solomon. She heard about him, so she wanted to come to him and confront him with a lot of difficult questions, I guess to try to challenge him and see how smart he really was, how wise he really was. And she presented her difficult questions to Solomon. He was able to answer all of them with no problem. Again, she was impressed by his wisdom at that point, impressed by the palace that he had built. She was amazed by his food, his level of organization, his clothes. So she praised him and gave him all sorts of affirmations. And she gave Solomon 9,000 pounds of gold and large quantities of spices and jewels. So she had a lot going for herself. He had a lot going for himself too, but it's like you're giving a gift to somebody who has a whole bunch, and then he ends up giving her gifts back. He gave her whatever she asked for. So I don't know what she would have asked for, but he said you can have whatever you ask for on top of whatever the customary gifts were. So they gave each other things. So the Queen of Sheba was obviously well off, a very astute and prosperous woman. Once they had their cordial meeting and then they exchanged gifts, the Queen of Sheba and her attendants returned back home. And then over time, Solomon did end up having 700 wives and 300 concubines. So talk about women, 1,000. I mean, okay. So eventually Solomon started to do evil in the eyes of the Lord. He started to worship other gods because of some of the wives that he took. And so the Lord raised up an adversary for Solomon. It was a young man named Hadad, and he had escaped from Egypt as a boy, and he was raised in Pharaoh's home. And Pharaoh liked Hadad, and he gave Hadad his wife's sister as a wife. And they had a son together named Genubath, and he was raised in Pharaoh's palace as well as one of Pharaoh's own sons. Like he was raised up with Pharaoh's sons. So just one more woman mentioned. Now Jeroboam was a rebel king to Solomon, and he did things that were contrary to what God wanted. So the Lord was upset with Jeroboam, and his son Abijah became sick. And so Jeroboam told his wife to dress up as a different person, disguise herself. And then he told her to take 10 loaves of bread, some cakes, and a jar of honey to the prophet and ask about the son. Like he wanted to know, is my son Abijah going to get better? He had his wife pretend to be someone else and then go and present the gifts and ask about Abijah. And so Ahijah, I think I'm saying these names right. I don't know. Ahijah was a prophet. He was an old man. He couldn't even see. So I'm not sure why Jeroboam thought she needed to disguise herself, because he couldn't see. But the Lord God revealed to Ahijah that she was disguised. So when she came in pretending to be someone else, Ahijah called her out and said, why are you pretending to be someone else? Ahijah let Jeroboam's wife know, I have bad news for you. I need you to deliver a message back to Jeroboam of bad news for his sons. Because of how he turned his back on God, he was making golden calves and worshiping other gods, that God was upset with him and that his sons were going to be wiped out because of it. And Ahijah ended by saying, your son Abijah that's sick right now, he's going to die when you enter back to the city. And when she got back to her town or her city, as soon as she walked into the door of her home, her son Abijah did pass away. And then later, Asa, he started to rule over Judah. He was the king of Judah. And now Asa did what was pleasing in the sight of God. So Asa was a good one. And his grandmother was Absalom's daughter, Maacah. And Asa, because he did what was right, he deposed his grandmother, so he took away her position as queen because she had built an Asherah pole. And Asherah pole was related to idol worship, so he cut the pole down and burned it. And now Ahab started to rule over Israel while Asa was ruling over Judah. And Ahab married Jezebel. Jezebel is the next woman that I'm going to be talking about. And Jezebel was basically like an evil woman. She worshipped Baal. And when Ahab married Jezebel, he started to worship Baal too. He built Asherah poles. And as you can tell from what happened with Asa, Asherah poles are a no-no. No. We don't mess with Asherah poles. So Ahab had Asherah poles built. He had an altar built for Baal. He was going all out. And the Lord did not, he wasn't happy with Ahab at all. Another thing that made Jezebel evil is that she tried to wipe out a lot of the Lord's prophets. So apparently she did have some of them killed. I guess she didn't get all of them, but that was her goal. She was not well in the Lord's eyes, and neither was Ahab. So this is where we first get introduced to Jezebel, but there's some other stories that I'm going to jump into before we get into more things relating to Jezebel, because all these different things happened while Ahab was king over Israel. So in the meantime, Elijah now, he is a prophet, and at this time there's no rain. There's a famine going on again, and God sends Elijah down to Zarephath. God tells Elijah there's a widow there and she's going to take care of you. She'll feed you. So Elijah goes down there. He sees this woman collecting sticks. He knows this is the widow that he's going to end up, staying with. And he asks her to get him some water. So she starts to go get him the water, and then he says, bring me some bread too. And then she turns back and she tells him, I'm collecting sticks right now because I'm sure there's a famine. She said she only had a handful of flour and a little bit of oil. She tells him, I'm collecting sticks right now. I'm getting ready to go home and make a meal for me and my son. We're going to eat that meal and then we're going to die. This because we don't have any food left. And Elijah told her, don't be afraid. Make me a cake or a little bread first, and then use whatever's left to make the meal for her and her son. And then he said, God said that he will make it so that your flour and oil will not run out, and you'll have enough that will take you through until it rains and the crops grow again. And the woman, she's called the widow of Zarephath. That's what she's known as. The widow of Zarephath did exactly what Elijah said, and they ate, and they had flour and oil for days and days beyond that. And the Lord blessed them with food for all that time, just like he promised. And then later the boy gets sick. The widow's son, he does get sick. And Elijah carries him up to the room where he's staying, lays him on the bed. Elijah cries out to the Lord and stretches himself over the boy. And then the boy recovers and he gets better. And Elijah brings the boy back to his mother. And then the mother is all excited. And she lets Elijah know, like, I definitely know that you are a man of God now and that the Lord speaks through you. So she had like 2 miracles happen right before her. And now the next thing that happens is Elijah is carrying out his prophet duties. And he goes and he meets up with Ahab. We're getting back into Jezebel now. He goes to Ahab. He has the prophets of Baal seized. And he brings them down. He has them brought down to the Kishon River, and he kills them. And now Ahab runs home and tells Jezebel what Elijah did. Jezebel is hot. She makes a threat to Elijah. She says, may the gods strike her down if she doesn't take Elijah out by that same time the next day. So she's like, I'm going to get you this time tomorrow. So help me, lowercase gods, strike me down if I don't do this. She's not playing. So Elijah flees for his life. He's nervous and afraid, so he runs off. The next thing that happens with Jezebel now is that a man named Naboth had a vineyard that happened to be right next to Ahab's palace. And because the vineyard is so close to the palace, Ahab asked Ahab asked Naboth, can I buy the vineyard from you or give you a better vineyard in exchange? You know, I want this vineyard. It's right here. It's so close to me. I really want this. Naboth tells Ahab, no, you can't have it.
Why would I give something that passed down from my ancestors to you?
And not only did he say no, he said, Lord forbid. So he was completely against it. Ahab got mad. He went back home. He was sulking. He was not eating. And when Jezebel saw him in that state, she got mad. So she's like, aren't you the king? Why are you sitting around here not eating and doing whatever? So she says, get up, eat. I'm going to get the vineyard for you. So Jezebel writes some letters to the elders and the leaders of the town that Naboth is from. And she is writing as if she's Ahab, because she seals these letters with Ahab's seal. So they think the letter is coming from him. And she's telling them to fast and pray and maybe have a feast of some kind. It doesn't really specify a feast in the version, at least the one that I read. But she says to set Naboth up in a situation where two lowlifes or scoundrels are going to sit across from him and basically accuse him of cursing God and the king. And then once he's accused, or this accusation is brought against him, they're supposed to take Naboth out and stone him. And so they did exactly what they were instructed to do. Now Naboth is gone. And then word gets back to Jezebel that Naboth is deceased. So she goes into Ahab and says, the vineyard's yours. Naboth is dead. So Ahab goes down immediately to try to claim the vineyard. And he runs into Elijah again. Elijah calls him out for all of this messiness. So the Lord gave Elijah a message to give to Ahab that all his male descendants were going to be wiped out. Disaster would come upon them and all the male descendants would be destroyed. And that dogs would lick up Ahab's blood in the same place where they licked up Naboth's blood. Pretty serious message there. And then Elijah also said that dogs would eat Jezebel's body. Ahab looked like, I guess he repented, because he humbled himself, and then apparently he didn't claim the vineyard. I'm assuming he didn't, because the Lord saw that he had humbled himself. The Lord said he wouldn't do anything to Ahab directly, but that he would take out the anger on his sons instead. There's a lot going on. Elijah ends up passing away, and Elisha takes over as the prophet. So he gets anointed by God, and Elisha is now picking up the work of Elijah. But before we get into different things that happen with Elisha and some of the other women, I just want to end with Jezebel in this video, and then I'll pick it up with the next part, talking about the few remaining women before we get to Esther. Jehu, he was instructed by the Lord to avenge all the people that Jezebel had killed. So when Jezebel hears that Jehu is arriving, she paints her eyelids and she does her hair, and then she sits up in a window and she starts yelling out to him, like calling him a murderer and just being sassy and rude. So Jehu orders that she be thrown out the window, and there's some eunuchs up there, and they throw her down, and she gets trampled, and all kinds of demise comes of her body. Jehu goes to the palace, and he's eating and has a little meal. He rests up a little while, and then he's like, oh, somebody go get that woman and bury her. But when they went to go get her, all that was left of her was the bones of her hands and feet and her skull. And so it was confirmed that the dogs had eaten her body, just like Elijah had prophesied would happen. And that's where I'm going to leave it right now. I just wanted to get some of those women covered, because as you can tell, there are a lot of different ones all along the way, and we're not done yet. So we're still in the Old Testament. I'm going to pick it back up with whoever is left, and then Esther, and then there might be a couple here and there. I don't think there are. Bathsheba is mentioned in Proverbs because she is Solomon's mother, and she gives him some wise instructions in Proverbs chapter 31 and other things like that. But we already heard what we heard about Bathsheba. But I think Esther might be the last woman that I end up talking about. So there might just be one or two parts left, and then we're going to go into the New Testament. So I hope you're keeping up with the series. I don't want to let this go too far before I get to the next one. And I'm just happy that you're enjoying it if you are. And glad that you're here. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.